The rest of us, let's turn in our Bibles to Psalm 23. I'm going to share a message from, of course, one of the more familiar Psalms. It really does have a wonderful encouragement for fathers and parents. Bless you this morning. I hope that you're encouraged from the words of this very familiar psalm. If you're a father, if you're a parent, I think you will understand some things this morning about your role as parents, and hopefully leave here more encouraged as a result of being here. Let's do this. Let's stand to our feet and let's read these words together. They're going to be on the screen behind me. I'm actually going to turn and face that screen instead of looking at that screen. Everybody turn around and see that screen. That's my screen. You see my screen? Now look at your screen. Isn't that better? So I'm going to look this way with you. Let's read this together. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for You are with me. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Let's pray together. Father, we are grateful for these words today, these words that many of us have treasured for years and have received from You as great comfort for years. And that is my prayer today, that we will leave comforted, that we will leave assured. Well, this world can be a scary place, both in reality and in our imaginations. And so, Father, this morning, help us to see things as they really are and take over our imaginations, captivate our imaginations with a better understanding of You. Help us, we pray, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You can be seated. Well, these are some of the most read and quoted and heard verses in all the Bible. Psalm 23. As we continue this summer walking through the Psalms, selecting a few of the Psalms to focus on for the summer, I debated on whether or not to do Psalm 23, quite frankly, because sometimes I find myself wanting to move away from the more familiar passages and go to passages that maybe we're not as familiar with. But I just really believe that it's a message that is timely for all of us. As I was praying, even in the world we live in, sometimes it can be a scary world. We hear about things, we experience things in our own life, or as I said, sometimes we just imagine things, or we go through the mental gymnastics of thinking through what might happen or what could happen. And I think we always need to understand and know that God is a great God, as we focused on last week, but God is also the God of all comfort. And He wants you to be comforted today. I'm convinced of that. And so we're going to look at these wonderful words from Psalm 23 together. Words that have been treasured for centuries, but some generations of believers might have understood them in a way that we don't understand them, because they may have had more exposure to the practice of raising sheep. So I'm not going to do a straw poll this morning to see how many of you have been around the raising of sheep. I don't know, there's bound to be somebody that has been in this room. I also know we are in Texas, and even having not lived in Texas all my life, I've watched enough Western movies to know that cowmen and shepherds don't always get along. A lot of times they're at odds with each other. So I don't know if that comes into play sometimes when as far as our understanding of being a shepherd. But I do think that having a better understanding of the role of a shepherd certainly helps us to understand Psalm 23 better. But even more importantly, Psalm 23, written by David, a shepherd himself, proclaims that God is his shepherd. And in doing so, David reveals some things about God. Remember, we're calling this series God's Mixtape. The Psalms are a compilation of songs that were put together to aid the people of God in worship, but God himself is the true author of these songs, and he himself is revealing himself to us through the Psalms. So here David this morning identifies God as his shepherd, and in doing so, in revealing God as a shepherd, tells us some things about God. So we're going to look at this morning, and we're going to look at it in light of the role of the shepherd in the life of the sheep. And if we see this, the role of the shepherd in light of the sheep, we can understand more about God in this way. So, what about shepherds? What is it that shepherds do for the sheep? Well, first, shepherds provide. They provide. David says this, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Words that we just heard Sydney sing a minute ago. I shall not want. The New Living Translation puts it this way, I have everything I need. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. Now hear this morning. Sheep don't hunt, but sheep got to eat, right? Sheep don't hunt for their own food, right? They have to rely on the shepherd to provide for them. Sheep rely on the shepherd for everything. Now, David has said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Remember, David was a very strong and capable person. Let's put it this way. David had skills. He had skills. He was capable. But his years as a shepherd informed him as he contemplated his great need for God. David saw himself as the sheep and God as the shepherd. That's important. It's important to understand and know our fundamental relationship in regard to God is that we are always in the role of sheep, and He is always in the role of shepherd. We are always in the role of those who have need. He is always in the role as the one who provides. We are always in the role of those who turn to the shepherd for all that we need. Again, this is important. David knew and understood his dependence on God. And he knew that because God was his shepherd, he had everything he needed. And maybe even more than that. Notice what he says later. He says to God, he says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. So here David shifts from presenting God as shepherd to revealing God as the great host who prepares a banquet for his own. Now he's identifying God as the one preparing the banquet, a feast that is so lavish that the one being served has more than he or she could possibly need. They have an overflowing cup. Represents way more than you need. Constant filling, no matter the circumstances. Even in the presence of enemies. Especially in the presence of enemies. The one who has God as his or her shepherd is provided for in an extravagant way. But what are these things that God provides? What is it that God provides? What is it about God's provision where we can say as his sheep, I shall not want? What is it about that? What is it that he provides? Well, let's put it this way. It's up to the shepherd to decide. And sometimes we're not comfortable with that. Sometimes we're not comfortable with the reality that it's up to the shepherd to decide what it is he provides for us. The shepherd knows what the sheep need and provides it. The shepherd prepares a lavish banquet for the sheep, and he decides what's going to be on the menu. He provides. And when God provides for you and me, he's the one who truly knows what we need. He's the one who gives us those resources that are best in keeping with his plans for us, for his purpose for us. Listen, you will lack no good thing that God knows you need. But sometimes we may feel as though the shepherd is not providing for us because we're the ones who have decided what it is that he should provide. Sometimes that's our problem. Maybe you're here this morning and you say, God's just not coming through for me. I've prayed. Nothing's happened. God's just not coming through for me. Well, is it possible that the reason you feel as though God is not coming through for you is that you're the one that's dictating to God what's on the menu? That you're the one who's seeking to dictate to God what it is that you need. The shepherd knows what the sheep need. You know who doesn't always know what the sheep need? The sheep. The sheep don't always know what it is they need. The shepherd does. It's always a decision that is best kept in the shepherd's hand. So the shepherd, and God is our shepherd, provides. But also shepherds protect. They protect. Sheep are terrible fighters. I mean, you're not going to see some Walt Disney movie about the great fighting sheep. Sheep are terrible fighters. They're defenseless, and they have many predators. They are without the protection of the shepherd, they're easy targets for all of the potential predators that lurk in their lives. David says this, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So David says he is comforted by two instruments of the shepherd. The first instrument has to do with the way that the shepherd protects. It's the rod. And the rod was used by the shepherd to fend off predators from the sheep. And David was one himself who was well acquainted with the valley of the shadow of death, or as some translations might put it, the darkest valley. Again, David himself was a great warrior. David was very capable of defending himself. As a shepherd, he himself had defended the sheep from great dangers like lions and bears. David defended the sheep from these animals, and David began his legendary role in the life of the people of Israel by defeating the great giant Goliath. But David's secret, which really wasn't that great of a secret, by the way, was that it was God himself who fought these battles for David. That was the answer to the question, why did David win all these battles? It was because God himself was the one fighting the battle for David. God's rod of protection was at work in David's life. God was the one fighting off the predators. God was David's protector. You and I, like sheep, may have no real understanding of the dangers we may face in our lives. We may not understand what's around the next corner. Sheep sometimes have no clue, right? They have no clue that the predator's around the next corner. They have no clue that when they come down from the mountain into the valley that there are predators awaiting for them there. You and I may not know what's around the next corner, or it's possible that you're here this morning and you're saying, I am constantly in what I would identify as the valley of the shadow of death. Maybe you feel like you're constantly living in that darkness. You're constantly living in that valley where there are predators all around. Maybe you're highly in tune with the fact that you need protection. Sometimes you may be in the valley of the shadow of death and not know it. Sometimes you feel like you're never leaving it. You're always there. Either way, relying on your own ability to keep you safe is not a good idea. You need a protector. You need a shepherd. But also, shepherd's guide. There's a second instrument used by the shepherd that David says provides comfort. He says, your staff. Your staff. Sheep wander a lot. Sheep are prone to wander, and sheep have no way on their own to know the best path to take. And so the shepherd uses his staff to keep the sheep on the path. David says about his shepherd, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. God knows the right path for you. It's his path for you. But notice what David says, or maybe more specifically at first, what he doesn't say. David doesn't say, he leads me in paths of righteousness for the betterment of mankind. That's not what David says here. He doesn't say he leads me in paths of righteousness so that everyone will think that I'm really good. That's not what he says here. He says God leads us on the right path for his name's sake. For the sake of his reputation in our lives. Now scratch your head. What does it mean here? That speaks of several things. First, it brings to mind this understanding. When I wander as a sheep, when I wander, it's not simply my reputation that's at stake. When I wander, as a person who is identified with God, I take his name with me. And so wandering is not just a matter of you deciding to go your own way. If you're identified as one of his sheep, if you're identified as someone who is part of the family of God, you're taking his name with you wherever you go. In other words, people might doubt God, or they might question God, or even consider God to be irrelevant if they see me on the wrong path, the path of my choosing. And so then you say, well, why is God so worried about his reputation? That sounds like weakness on God's part. If he's worried about his reputation, why is God so worried about his name's sake? That sounds selfish of God. That sounds weak of God. Well, if God was like us, it would be. Or let me put it this way, if he wasn't God, it would be. It might be weak on your part or my part to be that way, but not on God's part. Think about it this way. God cares about his reputation because he cares about other people. And he knows that it is in their best interest, meaning other people, it is in their best interest to become one of his sheep. So imagine people who are not existing in the reality where God is their shepherd. God knows that it is in their best interest that they turn to him as their shepherd. They need a shepherd. They need his guidance as well. And so when God is speaking of his namesake and his reputation, one of the ways of understanding this is he leads us in paths of righteousness. He leads us in the right paths for his name's sake, so that others would see his sheep following the right path, and they would turn and they would say, that must be a shepherd worth following. Because look at where they're leading, where that shepherd is leading them. I want to be a part of that flock. I want God to be my shepherd too. That's why God's reputation is important as it relates to how we as his people follow his path. So, let's review where we are so far. Shepherds provide, shepherds protect, shepherds guide. But here's something else that shepherds do. It's closely connected to these other things, but it's important. Shepherds nurture. They nurture. Years ago, I became an expert in raising dogs by watching a few episodes of The Dog Whisperer. Y'all remember that show, The Dog Whisperer? You don't remember? You're not experts in raising dogs because you've never seen the show The Dog Whisperer. I became an expert just because I watched 2, 3, 4 episodes of The Dog Whisperer. Finally, you're laughing and getting the fact that I'm really not an expert in raising dogs, but seriously, watching this show, I learned something that helped me understand better how to be the master that the dog really needs. The Dog Whisperer says that all dogs need these 3 things, and these 3 things are key to their behavioral development. Dogs need these things. They need discipline, exercise, and affection. Discipline, exercise, and affection. The Dog Whisperer lives by these principles. The dogs need discipline, exercise, and affection. Now, some dogs have an imbalance of those things. In other words, maybe they're getting a lot of affection, but they're not getting exercise and discipline. And maybe you know a dog like that. Normally a dog like that is talked to like this. Oh, you're so good. Oh, I love you, love you, love you, love you. Oh, come and kiss me in the mouth. You know, they're the dogs that just are not getting any discipline. They're not getting any exercise, but man, are they getting affection. And they're being treated like a child in the household and getting more affection than the children probably are. You know what I'm saying? That's an imbalance. But what is also an imbalance is a dog that may be getting the discipline and may be getting the exercise, but is not getting the affection. This also can affect the behavior of the dog if they're not receiving from the master the affection that they need. So think about it this way. God as our shepherd gives us all these things. And we've already seen some of this. He's our provider, he's our protector, he's our guide, but he doesn't stop there. God as our shepherd also nurtures us tenderly in an affectionate way, and that makes all the difference in our development. David says this, he said, he makes me, that should say lie, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Now, this is a picture of his provision. Green pastures are good eating for sheep. But it's also a picture of peaceful existence for the sheep. And don't miss this phrase. He restores my soul. He restores my soul. God cares for more than just your physical well-being. He cares about your soul. He cares about your spiritual life. He restores you to spiritual health as well as physical well-being as your shepherd. And he does so in such a tender way that it can be compared with a shepherd leading his sheep to a peaceful place. Listen, some of you need this more than anything else we've already mentioned today. You need to have your soul restored. You need to have your life renewed. God, our shepherd, does this. And he does this with tender affection for us. Tender affection that we long for. And we so often fail to find in a world that is full of hate and bigotry and selfishness and strife. That's what we often get from the world. But what we get from God, our shepherd, is tender affection. So this brings us to this point. Everything that I've said so far this morning leads us to this very moment right now. Everything else is just in some ways set up. Doesn't mean I'm going to be preaching for another half hour, don't worry. But everything that I've said so far is really just set up for this moment right now. Who is your shepherd? Who is your shepherd? Because you need one. You need one. Some of you are existing right now without a shepherd in your life. Some of you are trying to be your own shepherd. Some of you are relying on yourself for the things that only the shepherd that you need in your life can and should provide. Well, I want to draw our attention, as we will do frequently as we walk through the Psalms. I want to draw our attention this morning to something that was said in the New Testament. John chapter 10, Jesus himself said this. He said, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Jesus Christ identifies himself as the good shepherd. In that way, Jesus Christ is identifying himself to us as his people in the same way that the shepherd is identified in Psalm 23. Everything that Psalm 23 says about the shepherd also applies to Jesus in his role as our shepherd. And what did Jesus say? Or what did it say about Jesus? It said that when he saw the crowd, he had compassion on them. A gut, deep in the gut, love and compassion for the people. And why is that? It says because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Someone without a shepherd is lost. Jesus Christ at this very moment is looking at the people on this planet, and he's seeing people who are wandering around without a shepherd. They're like sheep without a shepherd, and he has compassion on them. And he wants to be their shepherd. I had a moment last Sunday that really kind of helped me in forming this sermon today. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Father's Day, I'm so grateful. When I approach Father's Day, Father's Day for me is not, oh, good, this is my day to get doted on. Just give me a steak and a potato and I'm good. But for me, I'm not worried so much about what I'm receiving on Father's Day. I wake up every Father's Day, and this is the thought on my mind. God, thank you for my children. Because my two girls are a gift to me from God. So I spend all day thanking God that he allowed me, and for whatever reason, chose me to be their father and gave them to me as my children. And my children are wonderful. I observe them do so many things. I observe our Catherine as she's growing up to be a young woman who's going to serve God by caring for others through music therapy. She's a therapist. She's going to help people as they're going through different things in their life through music, and it's a passion of hers, and God's going to use her in such an amazing way. And then I see Haley, and I see Haley's love for animals. And she's going to have to leave here in just a minute because she's got to go to work. She's got called into work. She works at an animal hospital. She's about to leave here to go care for the animals. So when you see her leave, it's not because she's upset with me. I promise you. But I see that love and affection for animals through Haley, and I'm moved by it. And Haley is the one who has introduced us to the animal that I want to talk about that is helping me understand a little bit better about what it means to have a shepherd in your life. And I actually have a picture of this animal. And the animal's name, I'm not going to tell you the name of the animal, but it's a poodle. Haley in San Marcos. She also works at a vet office in San Marcos. And this dog showed up one day from animal control. Basically, there had been an accident. They don't know what happened. The dog was injured. And so they brought this dog into the animal hospital. And when they brought the dog into the animal hospital, the dog could not walk. So what were they going to do with the dog? They were going to put the dog down. And what did Haley say? No, give me a shot. Let me try. So Haley took this dog to her apartment and nurtured this dog to where this dog went from not being able to walk to now the dog can walk. But the dog walks like this. So what did Haley name the dog? Tipsy. This is Tipsy. You see there the second picture, the picture on the right is Tipsy with Haley, and in the truest sense of the word, Haley is Tipsy's shepherd. All that we've talked about today. Last Sunday, I was on the couch watching the Astros, which is kind of my default position on Sunday afternoons these days. And I had heard somebody taking the dogs outside, including Tipsy. And so the door closed, and you have to understand, we have tile floors. And so this poor dog, it's so hard for this dog to get anywhere on our tile floors because she can't get traction. And I'm sitting on the couch, and some time has passed from the time I hear the door closed. And then eventually I look down, and there's Tipsy leaning up on the couch, wanting to come up and sit with me. And it was at that moment that I just kind of got overcome with emotion. And I looked at this poor dog and I said, everything is so hard for you. I mean, things that are easy for the other dogs are so hard for little Tipsy. I mean, just walking from one side of the house to the other just to be able to get up in the arms of one of us is so much work and so difficult. And it's at that moment that it dawned on me. This is the way God looks at me. God looks at me the way I look at Tipsy. Because often I look at myself as a fully capable person, right? I'm healthy, very grateful for that. I'm healthy, I'm competent, I can do things, not a whole lot of things, but I can't fix stuff at the house, but there are a lot of things I can do, right? And I don't spend a lot of time realizing or thinking about the things that I can't do, but in God's eyes, He looks at me the same way I look at Tipsy. I look at Tipsy and I realize, you need us. You need us. Come here. Let me hold you close to me. Let me comfort you. Let me let you know it's going to be okay. Let me help you. You're trying to walk, you can't make it. And sometimes she just collapses and I look down and I wonder how long she's just been lying on the floor because she's tired. So I'll pick her up and I'll take her somewhere, you know? But that's how God looks at us, because God sees us and realizes we are in great need of what only He can provide. We don't always realize it. We don't always realize we're in the valley of the shadow of death. He does. He knows what's around the corner. And so our role is not to all of a sudden be able to do all these things. Our role is to rely and depend on our shepherd, on His love, on His care, on His protection, on His guidance, on all of these things that He provides. That's our role. Who is your shepherd? Is Christ your shepherd? Or are you trying to have a go of it on your own? Is Christ your shepherd, or are you looking to your husband or wife to be your shepherd? Or another person? Or a president? A political figure? Who is your shepherd? Now, let me say a word to fathers this morning, and really not just to fathers, but to all parents. You need a shepherd. Because you know what you're called to do? You're called to be a shepherd in the life of your children. All these things, provision, protection, guidance, nurture, that's your role in the life of your children. You know what? David was a king. Yeah, he was a shepherd, but he also was a king. And as king, he was the shepherd of the people of Israel. But even as the great king he was, he himself needed a shepherd. You will never be the parent you can be unless you're allowing God Himself to be your shepherd. Dads, you need a shepherd. Quit trying to go it on your own. Quit trying to be the self-reliant American that can do anything and never trusting God and turning to Him as your shepherd. You need Jesus. You need to realize that you're meek. What is meekness? Meekness is realizing that God is strong and you're not, in the ultimate sense of things. You need a shepherd. Who's your shepherd? Jesus looked at the crowd, at the people. He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Are you here this morning as a sheep without a shepherd?